Well, to talk about the state of nuclear energy in the United States, I'm joined by investigative journalist Paul Dirienzo, author of the upcoming book, Hidden History of Nuclear Power. Paul, thank you so much for joining us in our New York studio.
Thank you.
20% of the energy in the U.S. comes from nuclear power. We have 99 nuclear reactors in the States. The biggest question here is, could Fukushima happen here in the United States? And is there any way that we can protect people from it?
Well, there's actually over 400 nuclear plants operating around the world, and whether it's United States or anywhere in the world, you have to ask yourself, are there any Fukushimas waiting to happen? And maybe in the United States, one of the most notorious reactors operating close to a city of many millions of people, close to where I'm sitting right now, is Indian Point, 45 miles from New York City. And we've discussed how that, previously on this program, how that nuclear power plant has had 7 very troubling errors in the last year, and people are wondering when the next one is going to come. And you know, this is a reactor that has a problem with its operator, the Entergy Corporation, which has, similar to TEPCO, not been forthcoming and not been fully transparent with the problems that that plant faces, and where the public is sort of left in the dark as to really what the problems are. And this is repeated time and time again throughout the United States at other plants. I mean, some are better run than others, but you have to think of those that are in California and other places that are near earthquake faults, that are near potential volcanoes, that are near places where tremendous storms can happen and tornadoes can happen, and there's always the possibility of terrorist attack. For example, Indian Point, it turns out, even though it's in New York State, is rated the plant most able to be damaged by an earthquake because of where it's located, and because there's an earthquake fault that runs very near to where it is. And then there's other sort of like man-made potential disasters. Again, referring to Indian Point, there's a 48-inch high-pressure gas main running or planned to run within a few hundred yards of the reactor site. A burst gas main has the potential of, in its own right, delivering a megaton or many kiloton range explosive force if it were to burst. And so this is being run right next to a nuclear plant. And the reason comes down to cost. Time and time again, it really comes down to money. It's very difficult to buy land in Westchester County where this plant is, where this pipe is to be built. The cheapest land, the land that's available, is already being used by a nuclear power plant. That's where they want to run it to save money. You know, you see this time and time again with nuclear power, where TEPCO is a good example. It turns out, after many investigations and what we know of what happened at Fukushima, is that the plant was not fully safe. I mean, the money wasn't spent.
It wasn't prepared, and no one could have predicted the magnitude of that tsunami. But as you mentioned, the power plants here in the United States, a lot of them are very old. This is not a new source of power. One of the things that I think is concerning is how we deal with the waste. Why, after all these decades of using nuclear power, have we not figured out a safe way to handle that waste?
Basically because nobody wants to live near it. You know, the waste was originally dumped in absolutely the wrong possible places during the Manhattan Project and during the Cold War. It was pretty much dumped wherever they could find, and there was very little done to warn people about where it was dumped or to even keep records of where it was dumped. And people to this day, every other day, you're discovering somebody is living on top of a waste dump from even 70 and 80 years ago. So you can imagine what's happening today. The fact of the matter is, there is nothing you can do about nuclear waste except store it as far away from people for thousands and thousands of years. And how can you ever predict what will happen 1,000 years from now, or even 100 years from now? How can you predict all our great nations of the world will even exist then?
Right. I wish we had more time to cover this, but I appreciate your insight. Investigative journalist Paul Dirienzo, thank you.
Thank you.